Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fool Me Once podcast. It's Maris.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back. It's Andrew.
If you're joining us on YouTube, then I'm sure you've noticed already that we have one of our little kitty cats is sitting in between us. We're actually sitting on his couch, Andrew, I think. I think here. Rory thinks that this is his bed his room. So hopefully he doesn't jump in front of the mirror or anything like that. But Rory is joining us, and we are in our second to last episode of our communication series. And today's episode is all around the different mediums and forms of communication. We could not wrap up this series without at least having one short and sweet episode where we kind of go over the guidelines of when to use different forms of communication, what is the appropriate medium of communication for different scenarios. So this episode's not going to have an extended, but we are going to go over the classic obstacles, opportunities, and rewards for why you want to use the right form of communication when handling certain situations in your personal and professional life. And with that, we decided that it made the most sense to kind of add those guidelines that you could follow almost in the beginning of the episode. It just didn't make sense for us to do an extended because, quite honestly, then we felt like because this is such a nuanced, specific topic, the bulk of this first part of the episode just wouldn't even have enough value. We do a good job at packing the other ones with value before we go into the extended, but this one we just thought, why not put it all into one episode?
Yeah, so we're going to pack this one with pretty much everything you need to know about the different forms and when to use which ones.
Yes, so first things first, we're just going to go over, we have our little list of notes that I have over here on my phone, but we outlined very simple guidelines that you guys can follow when it comes to thinking about, is this a situation that warrants a text, or would this warrant a phone call, or would it be more appropriate to do this on a Zoom, or what could have been an email that people are forcing into phone calls, because we've all been there.
Yeah, definitely.
Before, right? So this is about not only effectively communicating, but it's also understanding how to respect other people's time. I think that there's sometimes an old school way of thinking about, everything should be on the phone if it's professional. And I think we're just in new times where we need to have a hard reset of okay, there's so many different ways that people can get in touch with people, social media being a new addition to this list, that we need to really hone in on what is appropriate and what's inappropriate. And not only that, but how can you tie these different pieces together to accomplish the most effective.
Yeah, especially because we all have smartphones and anyone can be reached at any given time. So how are we still respecting people's boundaries, but still being efficient too with projects and whatnot? So.
And there are some things that do still warrant those super old school ways of communicating, such as writing a letter.
Yeah.
And there's timeless forms of communication that are never going to go away, right? So now it's just about looking at it through the lens of the time period that we're currently in, and how can we maximize all these different ways and just get the most out of our communication with our friends and our colleagues and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So we ready to get into the guidelines?
Yes. So Andrew, guidelines. This is going to be short, sweet, so get out your notebooks. This is honestly a good teaser of the type of stuff that we put in extendeds, but we're going to kick it off with that. So guidelines. What is the first form of communication and the guidelines for that?
Yeah, the first one on our list is text messaging. And this is the communication that you're going to want to keep brief for personal information or time-sensitive things. So you're looking for kind of a quicker response.
Text is going to be more informal forms of communication. And then you have emails, another form of written communication, but emails are going to be more formal, more appropriate when you need to document something or have a written trail of something. It's with more details, right? So it's going to be longer than a text message typically, like that's when you would know that it's appropriate to have an email. What's number 3?
Number 3, we have phone calls. And this is going to be for communication that's more urgent or could be personal or sensitive type information. Just stuff.
It's where you're not really like when I think of phone calls and like a guideline for phone calls is like if you don't exactly know where this is going to go, or you need to respect the other person to give room for maybe pushback or clarification or something like that, and it's not just something that you intuitively know exactly what's going to happen next, and you want to leave that open for discussion or hearing somebody out. Like I just think that it's super important for those more like nuanced conversations that could go one way or the other. I think that warrants a phone call.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Or something like heavy news or something like that. Yeah,
then phone calls are always best there. So what's number 4?
So number 4, guidelines for number 4 for video calls is it's similar to a phone call, but the moments when you would need a video call, the biggest thing that stands out to me is if the phone call or call element requires some sort of visual element to it. So that can look like you need to pull up something to share your screen. You need that super locked in personal engagement where you're able to quote unquote make eye contact, like through the screen, or have someone's undivided attention. You don't always know. Someone could be doing a million different things, just have you on speakerphone when it's a regular call. So that can lead to a lot of the obstacles that we're going to discuss. But yeah, a video call, the biggest thing for me, it's similar to a phone call. So all the same reasons, but the added thing for this is when it requires a more visual element to it.
Yes. Definitely. And then number 5, we have just the old-fashioned writing a letter.
Yeah.
This can be handwritten or typed, and this is going to be either very important information that you want communicated or something that you want someone to hang on to and keep, whether it's like a family Christmas letter or something like that.
Or a love letter or something that has like a timeless element to it that like if someone did hold on to that, they could go back and read it and there's some depth, there's some soul and heart in that, or it's just something that, I do think ultimately if something is going to be put in a letter, like there is an element of this came from my heart space and not like a logical
especially
place.
In this digital age that we're in, the writing of a letter just carries more weight.
So okay, so writing a letter. And then last but not least, number 6 form of communication we have is social media. I had to add this to the list because y'all know that I am notoriously known for my building of relationships online, right? And how do you take those offline? So we wanted to add social media to the list, especially when we get into examples of obstacles that come with inappropriate communication, using the wrong form of communication, rather, I should say. Also, there is a lot of inappropriate communication that happens in the DMs, but that's not what I mean. I mean, maybe using that form of communication inappropriately when it should have been in a phone call or something like that. But when we go over obstacles and opportunities, which we're about to jump into, that a lot of examples will be there. But guidelines for social media is to think of it as either a personal or professional touch point, which a touch point is just making contact or making some sort of engagement with another person. So liking, commenting, messaging, that sort of thing. So making that sort of personal or professional touch point. Or you can think of social media as a form of communication where you're building rapport with another person or nurturing and building a relationship with another person. So that's when it would be appropriate to have, social media as the form of communication. So I know that y'all are probably eager for maybe some examples. And the idea with these examples that we want to give you guys is so that it's easy to look at the guidelines and be like, those are obvious. Like, thanks so much for the no-brainers. But it's more particular than that, right? Like, when you're in the real life scenarios, everyone's not necessarily thinking of they're not pausing long enough sometimes, and oftentimes people just lead with what they're most comfortable with. Like, well, I'm not comfortable getting on the phone, so I'm just going to handle this over text. And so what we're trying to do is help you in all of these communication episodes see both sides of the story, right? So understanding, like, okay, it's not just about what you want and what your preferences are or what your needs are, or what your viewpoint is when it comes to communicating, but really good communication comes in, you know, how strong the other person's response is and what the overall outcome is of that communication. So focusing on the outcome of the resolution, of the efficiency, of the success, whatever the situation is in communication, it's not just about what you want. So the same thing comes with choosing forms of communication. So I would say, like, even before we get into the official obstacles, I just want to say this before I forget to say it, is if you don't already do this, every single person that you're in communication with or have relationship with, try and ask them, like, hey, are you like a phone call person? The same way that when you meet someone, you're like, are you a hugger? Hopefully you ask, are you a hugger? Or do you prefer a handshake? You know, it's respecting people's boundaries and just respecting other people's, you know, their own preferences. So that's a great tool when trying to gauge, like, how does that other person feel? And then you, as the emotionally evolved, self-actualized person, can then adjust, you know, to people who maybe really have a strong preference for, I like everything to be in an email, or I'm really uncomfortable on the phone. You're going to get a lot more out of me if I can write it down. And it's just kind of understanding and using that emotional intelligence to then make decisions later. But practice that first and foremost, asking someone. Now, when you don't know, this is when we're just going to get into rule of thumb that we think applies to every single person and all types of personal and professional relationships. So let's get into it.
Let's get into the obstacles. Yeah, so obstacle number 1 is going to be miscommunication. And we see this come into play a lot. I think especially when you have text messages.
Yeah, like if you're texting someone and they don't know your tone, and then it like leads to that misunderstanding, right? Is that what you're saying? Like it should have been a phone call?
Yeah, like should have been a phone call, but then you lean on text message too heavily. And this could have all been cleared up with like a quick 5-minute phone call. So
yeah, like, drastic. I mean, I think that's the most classic like miscommunication, misunderstanding is when people, and I feel like we've all seen like the memes or the GIFs or whatever. There's one that's standing on my mind that I can't fully think about, but it's like they literally, it's like 2 actors, like, or it could have been a scene in a movie or something, but it's like someone texting and they're super chill, but the other person's interpreting it like they're trying to have fighting words. So the one guy's like getting all ramped up, ready to go. He's like, oh, meet me outside. Okay, I'll come meet you outside. And he's thinking this guy's trying to have a fight, where the other guy is just thinking that he's like coordinating that I'm going to come pick you up in like 15 minutes. Yeah. But it's like a whole series of like back and forth over text that it's so funny the way that it played out.
Yeah, that
if
was
y'all
a key.
Know what it is.
It was a Key and Peele skit. I just remembered it. Yeah. A comedy skit. It's so funny. But you could read any text message in an angry tone and think this person's trying to start beef with you.
Yeah. And so often I'm so guilty of this, like especially with like text messages, or if someone's like, this is a classic one. Like someone texts and is like, can we have a phone call? And that's all they say. Like my mind races and I see that.
This
like,
could be about anything.
I'm the person who tries to use emojis and exclamation points, and I'm anticipating that someone could be concerned. So I'm always trying to give as much context as possible. Like if I need someone to get on the phone, I'm telling them why I want to get on the phone, or I'm leading with some sort of like positive element. Or if it's not good, then I have enough respect to be like, this isn't going to be a good phone call. So like get in a good, get ready for it. I'm just kidding. But it's like, hey, like I'm kind of upset. I want to respect your time, but there is something that I want to discuss with you. When you have time, I'd like to put a meeting on your calendar and like us talk through this. I'm not just like blindsiding someone with, especially someone when you're like in a position of power over them, like an employee, or if it's a client to whoever it is that they, you know, whatever it is. Like if you're someone that kind of has the power, I think it's even more considerate for you to make sure that you're kind of clarifying things. if you're going to send a text asking for a phone call or something like that, instead of, then you have the other people who are just putting a meeting on your calendar, a boss to their employee, but at least then you're like having a subject line and they probably know like what it's about.
I just think it's considerate, and I prefer when someone gives clarity on like why they're asking for the phone call. You give that person time to mentally prepare, how much time to block off, like all these things.
Yeah.
That's just common courtesy, and you should do.
Okay, I think it's like a good time to get into number 2. So obstacle number 2 is delayed responses. So I think the most classic form of a delayed response is when you really need to communicate something or get a response back from somebody and you send them an email and you only send them an email. And for all you know or didn't realize is this person only checks their email like once a week. So you're in the process of working on a project or trying to push things along, or you have a time sensitive sale or something like that, and you send out an email and this person is just having a crazy week and like didn't see it. So now this project is getting delayed and delayed and delayed because you're relying on this person to like reply to your emails to give you that updated logo or whatever. And all of this could have been avoided if you had just shot them a text letting them know, hey, you have an email in your inbox, but I'm currently working on this thing, and if you could find a couple minutes to like shoot me over the updated headshot, like I'll have your website ready, right? But if I don't hear back from you, and this is where you're using all your communication skills, right? Everything you've learned up to this point in this series, to be like, if I don't hear back from you, then I'm going to be super busy the next 3 days and I won't be able to revisit this until next week. So you're creating, anticipating needs and anticipating respecting another person's deadline, the overall project deadline, and you're letting them know exactly, you're giving them the opportunity to jump in and get you what it is that you need, because they thought they sent you the right file and they actually sent you a wrong file, right? So waiting on them to check that giant email chain, that for all they've been using that email chain up to this point is for mass revisions. And so they're not even opening the email because they're thinking, well, I don't even have time to sit here and like get all my updates about where we're at with this project. I'll look at that next week when I'm not busy. And they're not realizing that because they never opened the email that you just needed this one quick thing, right? So that's where then you're going to use the text message to say, hey, I just emailed you, but I'm also shooting you a text. Can you have your assistant or somebody else get me XYZ?
Yeah, and it just keeps the project moving and keeps the line of communication open.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So that's the best example I could give for delayed responses. I'm sure that there's like a million, but that's how you can kind of integrate the different things to know what's appropriate. Like maybe another great example professionally is to think about like, okay, let's say you have this super awesome Zoom call and it's having enough emotional intelligence to understand like, okay, everyone just got off this Zoom call feeling great about everything that we talked about. But that also is like checking a box for everyone. Like, okay, I've dedicated now an hour or 2 hours to this thing. So now I can move on with my day and like refocus on something else. But what are the things that you discussed on the call that you now are not putting in a recap email? That can create delayed responses and all the things that you need because you're relying on that person to get off the Zoom call and feel like, okay, we're good to go. Like everyone's good. Everyone's on the same page, but you're not anticipating like, well, who's going to send this recap email? What are the closing thoughts and who's responsible for sending a recap email so that we're actually now in writing, documenting, like we talked about in email, what everyone's next steps are, what expectations are for when that person's going to be sending this stuff so that we can keep things moving.
Yeah, that's such a good one. Because think about how many times people get off a call and then get right back on another call. So sending that recap email is just such a good courtesy thing to make sure everyone's on the same page. So I love that.
And holding yourself accountable to doing that. Because I know there's so many times where I have had back-to-back calls. So I have to physically say to the person, like, I will send a recap email to you, by the end of the day that's reminding you of everything that you said that you're going to do that I need from you and everything that I need, just to make sure that like we're not leaving in this like super high vibey excited feeling, but not grounding any of those decisions into reality. And to me, that grounding into reality is like holding not only yourself but the other person accountable to keeping this project moving forward. So I love that. And we have a lot of people who get that, who like they're like, well, what do you need for, like, this is a great call and all, but like what do you need from me in order to make sure that like they're not holding back? So it's having the courtesy to set expectations and all of that. So delayed responses is number 2. Obstacle number 3 is going to be ineffective communication.
Yes. So ineffective communication, what's a good example of that?
I would say, like, maybe you could talk about, like, when you really need things from someone, like, you need their thoughts on a revision that you did on a website or something like that, or a project that you have working on, and they're so busy that they're, like, running around and they're just, like, in the car, so they're like, I'll call you on the way home and we could talk about my newsletter edits or something like that, and then they're remembering it wrong or referencing something, not using the right words or not referencing the appropriate page or segment of something, then you go and make those changes thinking that like you knew what they were talking about.
Yeah, anything design related, especially a website's such a perfect example. I'll always, if we're doing a review and I need their feedback, we'll always schedule a Zoom call because there's so many visual elements that I'll need them to like look at, or maybe they're wanting me to do something and I need to show them the limitations that I'm working with.
Yes.
So then they can understand like, oh, okay, maybe I need to pivot and request something within the world that they can accomplish. Just so much, like, I understand sometimes people don't want to get on a call, but that one Zoom call that could be 30 minutes or less could have alleviated like 20 emails.
Yes.
Which in the long run would be way more time consuming. So
exactly.
Like, that is one tool that we use with video calls that make it just extremely effective and efficient.
Yeah, so that's like a great example. If that were all left to email, how long and how much back and forth is happening because you guys are just like not communicating, especially in the world of design. And I'm sure this happens in a lot of other industries, but it's like people don't know the proper jargon. They don't understand when they say logo that they're talking about the name and text and font as well as the icon, but like sometimes they're only referencing the icon, and you as the designer are thinking, well, the entire thing is your logo, the name and the icon. And there can just be so much, not only like misunderstanding, but it just creates a lot of ineffectiveness. And that's the point, is we want communication to be super efficient, everyone on the same page, and it's having enough respect for that other person's time to be able to communicate that too. It's not you forcing people to get on phone calls when they're over there thinking like, oh, this could have just been an email, like, why is Andrew trying to get on the phone with me? But it's saying, hey, we're using our own past experience to acknowledge, like, if we could just get on a Zoom, or maybe if you could just watch the 3-minute Zoom recording I sent you, you can see all the different examples of like hero images or hero videos that we have, and you can make a selection from there, right? It's about meeting people halfway and understanding like what they need, right? And what you need as well. So when all parties are more efficient and effective in their communication tactics, then it just goes a long way.
Yeah, that's so true. Another
example of ineffective communication before we jump into opportunities is, I'm going to bring social media into this. Like, I have always opened the door, especially with how often on my personal social media I will share about projects that I'm working on or clients that I worked with or proof of my work, because I've built such a presence through my personal social media that I use that also for lead gen. And it's been super successful over the last, 8 or 9 years in terms of like me, since I started the marketing company, like what that looks like, right? And so if someone DMs me, and this happens a lot, where someone will DM me and be like, oh my gosh, I love this website. You did such a good job. I really need like your help with my website. And then I'm there going 1 or 2 steps too far in the DMs discussing things, to where then they kind of have satisfied their fleeting thought of like, whatever, and then they've moved on to like scrolling social media and doing something else. And where I failed was realizing at what point in the conversation should I have taken this out of the DMs and required there being a scheduled phone call, because I know that I'm not closing deals in the DMs. I know, not that it's impossible, but I know I have a higher success rate of closing people when I'm on the phone and we're having an actual conversation with a professional undertone to it, right? Like sometimes things can be fun and exciting, especially in a creative space, a creative world. People can get carried away with brainstorming with me in the DMs. And if I don't figure out how to translate that conversation into, we need to get this into an email chain. I need to know how serious this person is. And if I say, hey, here's a link to put yourself on my calendar for a 15-minute call, and then they ghost me, then they were just trying to take advantage of me in the DMs, ask me questions about marketing with no intention of ever hiring me for anything, right? So that's another form of super ineffective communication, where I'm thinking that I'm engaging with this person because they're a serious lead, and in reality, they're just wanting to get my thoughts, that then they can take those thoughts and have their intern execute them. And that has happened so often where we will literally be discussing back and forth, and it's like, oh, I hired like my cousin's nephew's aunt's little sister who's just started in work, and like I just wanted your expertise and I'm gonna pass this on to them, or I was just kind of like using your insight in order to vet this other situation I have going on for someone else or whatever. And that person wasn't doing it with like with like malicious intent, right? But it's about me understanding like, well, do I leave that situation feeling good about that when I didn't know it up front? Or how am I better gauging, right? So it's about cutting it off at least shorter, to where if I would have introduced an email or a phone call, they could have cut to the chase way faster. Like, oh, sorry, like I didn't mean to like imply that I'm looking to hire anyone. I was just curious. And then I'm a lot more receptive of that, because we've discovered that, 2 minutes into this DM back and forth, versus I just spent 30 minutes having this back and forth DM with someone just to find out that they were just picking my brain.
Yeah. So it's like, once you realize in the DMs that they're looking for a service that we offer that we can help them with, it's taking them from the DM to a potential like intro consultation phone call, which is like how we qualify leads and determine if this is going to be a real opportunity for us.
Or like just knowing more up front, like they're just trying to pick my brain, which is fine in some instances, but then that's up to me to determine like, well, is this worth me spending the next 30 minutes of my life? Or maybe do I need to schedule a call with that person's intern, whoever, and like, then I can still offer, I can still be there, and I can still be someone who I can still show my heart that I want to help and I want to whatever, like, and I'm more than happy to schedule a time that makes sense on my calendar to like meet with that person, versus then leaving that being like, because what happens, which ties all these obstacles together, is the misunderstandings, the delay in response, the ineffective communication can build resentment. It can completely, ruin relationships in some instances, right? Or it can create false narratives in one or the other, both people's minds, about what's actually going on, because we're just simply not using the proper form of communication, right? It can take up a ton of headspace, a ton of hours like fretting, worrying, anticipating that phone call because they didn't give you context of why you're getting on the phone with your boss, right? So it's about how do we eliminate that so that everyone's headspace is not so preoccupied with all this confusion and clutter that otherwise wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I think that's great. I can't tell you how many times I like didn't want to have a phone call for whatever reason, and then ended up feeling way better after the phone call.
Yeah. But also, like, that could have been avoided if you just knew that the person wasn't mad at you, like, before.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's jump into opportunities. The opportunities are super short and sweet. But the first opportunity that we have on our list is improved clarity. And improved clarity looks like everything that we just talked about if those things had not happened, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like knowing, okay, it's setting expectations when you have proper form of communication. You can talk about, again, like sort of maybe even improved clarity, like when you get off a lead call, right? So this is a little bit different. It's not just your standard project management, but Andrew gets off a lead call and he always not only tells them what he's going to email them after, but he gives them a step-by-step process. You can talk about all the things that you prepare them with so they can pull the trigger.
Yeah, so I get off the call having established expectations and understand, and also communicating to them like exactly what they can expect. So like I found out what service they're interested in, and then they know to expect an email from me with like the contract, the invoice that they know they need to pay, next steps. It's like everything that all they need to do is decide they want to pull the trigger, and then everything is already in motion to happen. Versus if I get off the call thinking they're kind of interested in something, and then too many things are left up in the air, and there's like not a direct action that we can take to move this along forward.
Yeah, or if he just got off the lead call and is like, all right, here's more information on the pricing we discussed and whatever, and then you're just following up a million times. Like, we've learned, even though sometimes people will decide like, okay, it's too much money for me right now, or I talked to my husband or my business partner and now's not the time, and we have to cancel that contract and cancel that invoice that we sent. Like, sometimes that does happen, right? And we're super clear, and he's super clear and good at explaining that all we're doing is setting you up for if you do want to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that up front you're getting a copy of exactly what the service is, what you're paying for, all of that. But not only that, you're getting like the actual contract that you would be signing. We're going ahead and acting as if you are going to say yes. So when you're making this decision, there's no confusion on the fact that like, this is what's outlined in the contract. And then we leave it open to where before you're paying us, right, before you're paying the invoice in order to initiate the start of services, you have the ability now to say, hey, well, I looked at the contract and like I would like this amended and this amended, or I would like this at, whatever. And so then everyone's on the same page. Then they can feel super clear and prepared with absolutely everything that they need to know before they're agreeing. And a lot of times that will scare people off when they see exactly what it is that they have to agree to. That's holding them when they review the client responsibilities. Like, that's when we weed out a lot of people who either aren't super serious or they're not prepared to follow the timeline that's agreed upon in the contract. There's like a bunch of different things, right? And so that's great because we now know the people who are like, boom, this is amazing. They respect those boundaries. And this goes back to the boundaries episode, right? It's that clarity, when you have clarity in the way that you communicate, the improved clarity for this first opportunity by using the right forms of communication, you are setting yourself up for not having all those obstacles basically that we just discussed, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had to get over my misconception in the beginning of like, I thought that would be too pushy if I was just like setting the contract and invoice up front. But what I learned through going through that process is when I didn't do that, they kind of lived in this wishy-washy gray area for weeks, not knowing if they were going to convert and we were actually going to help them. And I had changed my mind to like, no, they're coming to us because we're the expert in this area and we're going to be the one to guide them through the process. And this is the process.
Yeah. And better give them the picture up front than have them maybe like questioning or not understanding, because we understand these people aren't in this world and a lot of times haven't hired a marketing agency before, right?
Yeah.
So improved clarity. This also kind of ties into number 2, which is efficiency. So efficiency, obviously, if we're sending a contract and we're setting them up to be able to pull the trigger because they have a timeline and they want everything done in 1 or 2 weeks, right? Like, we're creating more efficient communication by having that quick phone call. It's 15 minutes of their time to ask all of their clarifying questions. We're asking clarifying questions, making sure that we are fully understanding the scope of work so that when we are pulling the trigger with them as well as them with us, that everyone understands what is obligated. So we're not overcommitting and under-delivering or anything like that, right? And we, again, had to learn this the hard way because when we were just excited about getting them signed up or starting the project, but we didn't have the full understanding and we didn't know to send them the checklist of everything that we needed from them in order for things to get jump started, then we're sitting there, okay, everyone signed up, but now we're still waiting on them to, send over their logos photos and their headshots. And we've created systems, right, and efficiency of communication that look like combining a lot of these things. The phone call, the video call that happens once they sign the contract. So in this instance, we're starting with it might have started in the DMs. Let me just paint a full picture for efficiency.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
So this conversation started in the DMs. Hey, I might want to work with you. Boom. I'm aware of not having this in the DMs. I'm taking it out of the DMs, sending them a link. They're getting on a 15-minute phone call. So they sign up for the 15-minute phone call and talk to Andrew. Andrew sets expectations on the call, but he knows better than to just leave it there. So now he's incorporated the third step, which looks like he is sending them a recap email of the phone call that not only covers everything that he just said on the phone call and recaps that, it's reminding them of what his understanding is of what they're looking for. And all of that has been put into a contract with the exact payment invoice, all created and all sent to them with the signing off of the email of call me if you have any questions, but this is pretty much all ready to go once you review it for you to pull the trigger. Then boom, they're excited. They pull the trigger. All expectations have been set because it's clearly outlined in the contract. They signed the contract. We're, under contract now.
Yeah.
So we're ready. We're committed to this project. They paid their invoice. And so it's all systems go. So the very next thing is Andrew sending, okay, here's some forms that I need you to fill out. So here are the forms now for us to gather your thoughts on your brand or your website or whatever the situation is. And you can trust that once you fill out these forms, we have everything that we need from you because we're giving them the checklist of what we need from them so that they can then clear their mind, go about their day, go about their week, and they know that we're now busy carrying our end of the bargain. So we have that. And then it's, okay, you filled out these forms, and we've also scheduled in this initial process our very first Zoom call that we already have scheduled to review all of this. And whether we need to discuss anything on the Zoom call or not, because we have clarifying questions or not, that Zoom call is to build those personal connections by having that eye contact. It's not just a phone call, it's where we're building rapport, pulling up the answers to their things, giving them space to clarify anything. If they now are reviewing their answers with us sitting there to say, you know what, I wrote that, but I actually meant this, or I want to add this, or I came across this logo design that I really loved in between filling out the form and the Zoom call. And we're then having another checkpoint of everyone's on the same page. So then we're leaving the video call, and now everything is now being recapped in here's the first project timeline email. Here's everything that we got from the call. Here's when you can expect all of your first drafts. And here's everything that we're still waiting on from you, right? Per our Zoom call. So now everything's been translated into email. From here now, it's either communicating in that super efficient email chain that has everything outlined, or we're jumping on quick phone calls for clarification, or sending text messages for those time-sensitive things while we're working on the project. And all the while, we've used all these different forms of communication, right? So maybe during the process of the project, we're posting teasers and tagging them, or we're being super engaged with their content, and hyping them up as they're posting their own teasers about what's coming, right? So we're building those relationships and rapport through social media. We're not sending them a DM being like, hey, we still need that updated headshot, right? We're reserving our social media communication to be for those appropriate relationship building things, right? And then maybe we're writing them a letter when we close out the project and sending them a handwritten note thanking them for choosing to hire us, right? We should probably be better at that. All of us should be better at that, right? So that's the best way I could, whatever. Which basically ties a bow on the third one, which is stronger relationships.
Yeah, all of that just builds a super strong, lasting relationship with this person that was probably started out as a casual observer of your Instagram account. And now they're like this lifelong fan of us because we've taken them through this whole process. We've leveraged all the proper forms of communication, and we've built this relationship with them through that process.
Yeah. So now we have these super, strong relationships with those people. And we learn throughout that process if things go smoothly with someone from step 1 to step, 10 or whatever, like through that process, like who are like people are. When things go awry amidst all of those steps that we have this system in play, that's when we start to learn like who's just going to be a difficult person to work with, the type of person maybe we don't want to work with in the future. It allows us to fine tune that system to have clearer, more effective communication in our contracts. We're constantly adding things and tweaking things, right? We're using that emotional intelligence as we use our communication skills to then be like, okay, well, this could have better been served, whatever. Or now I'm realizing one of our biggest missing pieces is making sure that we are always sending a handwritten letter after, right? To show kind of our heart space, not just thinking them over the phone. I think could go a long way in relationship building. So that's it, y'all.
That was great. I love how you tied everything together.
I know. I didn't even plan that.
Not even just through the communication mediums, but like the emotional intelligence and things we've touched on in past episodes. That was great.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, well, we hope you guys are enjoying this. Tomorrow's episode is going to be all about how you talk to yourself. We couldn't end the communication series without bringing it full circle back to your own journey of self-actualization, and how you talk to yourself is honestly step number one in being able to better communicate with other people and setting yourself up for success. So we're going to end the communication series with that episode, and then we are jumping in next Monday to our Creating Your Reality series, which is going to be a jam-packed series of not only mindset and things you can do in your personal life, but how you can build a personal brand, a professional brand, all of our years of marketing and understanding how you can, tangibly create your reality. We're going to have so many lessons on that, which I think people have probably been itching for since I started my marketing company. A lot of those are going to dive into that, but what I'm most excited about is talking about things like law of attraction and how you are easily creating your reality without putting in so much work and effort. I think we're moving into an age and a time that not a lot of people are aware of, where it's going to be super, super important about how you're setting yourself up for this sort of shift in energy and new ways of doing things and new ways of, bringing business in to your life, or bringing these kind of things into your reality that don't necessarily mean that you're hustling and you're working and, you're a slave to your job, or you're a slave to your day-to-day life and your personal relationships in order to feel a sense of peace or success. And we truly just cannot wait to tell you not only the things we've learned up into this point in all of our years of marketing and all of our years of personal development, but so specifically the last year and a half.
Yeah, we have so many great things to talk about in this next series. I cannot wait to get into it. It's going to be so exciting.
So thanks guys for listening. Thanks for joining us on YouTube, and we'll see you in the next video.
Yeah, thanks y'all. We'll see you next time.